me take this opportunity to reintroduce myself, William Baloyi from GCIS. Today we are going to have a post-cabinet briefing that will be led by Minister in the Presidency. Whether it's the last or not, I think the Minister will be also able to guide us on that. Today we are also joined by Sarah Klas for interpretation purposes, sign language. She's not alone, she's also with Milambo Kebe, who would then take turns in assisting with the sign language interpretation. Without taking much of the time, let me then invite the Minister in the Presidency to take us through the post-cabinet briefing. Somebody was asking me about the date. Today is Monday, the 11th of December, which is the last month of our calendar year. Thank you very much. Minister.
Good morning. Today we are also going, after the post-cabinet briefing, we are also going to release the third quarter Operation Vulindlela report, in particular because of the reforms that the state has been driving and the progress that has been made. And therefore we are going to share the platforms, but we are going to complete the post-cabinet and do the questions and then hand over to Operation Vulindlela. And the Operation Vulindlela third quarter progress report will be led by Ms. Guma, and she is with the National Treasury and is part of the joint program of the Presidency and National Treasury. But in terms of the post-cabinet, Cabinet met on Friday the 8th of December 2023 to consider outstanding matters from its cabinet meeting of the 29th November 2023. However, on issues of the environment, there was the 11th Presidential District Model Imbizo in Lejelupuza district of the Free State. Their cabinet noted the steady progress government is making in addressing the service delivery challenges facing our people, and the feedback received from communities during the presidential is Imbizo. In particular, progress made by the Department of Water and Sanitation that appointed the Vaal Central Water Agency as the implementing agent to oversee the sanitation infrastructure challenges in Machabaneng local municipality, which had not been operational for more than 10 years. The intervention mandate is divided into 3 areas of scope, which is the wastewater treatment works, the pump stations, and the sewer networks. And DWS has allocated funds for 4 financial years to complete the required work. To date, Department of Water and Sanitation has spent 391 million rands on first, the refurbishment or upgrading of the wastewater treatment works projects, a total of 11 water waste treatment projects, which 9 of them were not functional. 1 water waste treatment works, which is in Teronia, was completed in May 2023. 2 contractors have been appointed for Tabong and Kutlwanong water waste treatment works. And the refurbishment of Tabong water waste treatment works is at 50% completion, and the refurbishment of the Kutlwanong wastewater treatment works is at 23% completion. And also the department has done progress with the refurbishment of the sewer pump stations. A total of 52 out of 57 sewer pump stations were not functional, and 10 contractors were appointed for the refurbishment of 29 pump stations, and overall progress is 34% in completion. And thirdly, the unblocking of sewer network pipelines and blocked chambers. A total of 1,543 kilometers of sewer pipelines which are blocked, and 7 contractors were appointed for Kutlwanong Tabong Extension 1, 2, 3, and 4, and Henema, and about 128 kilometers of the 463 kilometers targeted collapsed sewer lines have been cleared. and DWS is exploring the process of procuring equipment and fleet to assist the municipality with operation and maintenance to reduce sewer spillages. On the challenges of water supply to Majabaning and Nala local municipalities, which are due to aged infrastructure and high water losses, and the infrastructure that has not been maintained for about 10 years due to non-payment of services, the department has allocated 243.7 million in October to refurbish the Bulk Fontaine and Virginia water treatment works, including the bulk water line, and 5 service providers have already been issued with orders to repair the pump station and the chlorine room at the water treatment works. Also, Cabinet on the evacuation of South Africans from Gaza. Cabinet welcomed the arrival back home of 19 South Africans who had been stuck in Gaza. South Africa extends its gratitude to the government of Egypt for granting our citizens safe passage through the Rafah crossing into its country. South Africa calls for an immediate and permanent ceasefire and the resumption of talks that will end the violence arising from the continued belligerent occupation and that will lay the basis for a just and lasting solution to the challenges of the people of Palestine and the peace of the people of Israel. On the 10th anniversary of the passing of President Nelson Mandela, Cabinet joined the nation in reflecting on the life and legacy of the father of the nation and our first democratically elected president, Ntate Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. As we look ahead to the milestone of 30 years of freedom and democracy in 2024, along with our 7th national and provincial elections, we can proudly say that our democracy remains strong in honor and of his legacy and contribution to our freedom. On updates to Cabinet, developments at the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. As part of ensuring readiness when the 2024 academic year for post-matric education begins, Cabinet was briefed on measures that are being put in place to avoid the challenges that bedeviled the National Student Financial Aid Scheme in the 2023 post-matric academic year. The Minister of Higher Education and Training will provide details on measures that are being put in place to improve the performance of NSFAS. On the Petro SA GTL reinstatement project, Cabinet received an update on progress with the process to reinstate the Mosel Bay GTL refinery as one of the critical components of Petro SA's turnaround strategy. Cabinet was updated about the process followed by CEF to source partners with requisite technical and financial resources to support Petro SA in bringing the refinery back to full operation. The preferred partner would share in the risk and rewards of reinstatement of the refinery. The refinery reinstatement has a potential to retain at least 2,000 direct site jobs with an additional potential fixed-term employment opportunities for 4,000 jobs during the construction phase. Cabinet endorsed Petro SA's recommendation to select Gazprom Bank Africa as the investment partner for the reinstatement of the plant and production. Cabinet noted that this selection of Gazprom Bank is still dependent on the final investment decision that will be informed by a joint bankable business case, as well as the terms and conditions which are anticipated to be finalized in April 2024. Cabinet decisions. First one, freight logistics roadmap. Cabinet considered and approved for publication the Freight Logistics Roadmap, which outlines a clear path to address immediate challenges in the logistics system and also seek to reform the system in the long term. The challenges within South Africa's freight logistics system poses a significant constraint on economic growth and job creation. The impact is currently felt more in job losses in the mining and manufacturing sectors in particular. The immediate priority of the logistics roadmap is to stabilize and improve the operational performance of the freight rail network, which presents a severe constraint on exports. The main implementation mechanism for the short-term interventions will oversee operational improvement through 5 priority corridors with full alignment with the Transnet board-approved turnaround plan, which identifies short and medium-term actions to improve operations and stabilizes Transnet's finances. The roadmap outlines 3 areas of intervention to improve rail performance, the first one being operations and rolling stock improvements. This includes returning long-standing locomotives to service through agreements with original equipment manufacturers to ensure a supply of spares or through the appointment of a step-in OEM. 2, security and safety of the rail network, which includes collaboration with law enforcement agencies. And thirdly, the capital investment program, both for the expansion plans and also to sustain operations. In addition, the roadmap outlines a path to implement the commitments made in the National Rail Policy and the National Commercial Ports Policy and plans for the reform of the freight logistics system. Second decision relates to the draft rail private sector participation framework. Cabinet considered and approved the draft rail private sector participation framework, which aims to provide an interim approach to and a model for future decision-making to enable private sector participation in the rail infrastructure system. Given the current challenges within the rail infrastructure, the rail private sector participation framework proposes commencement of private sector participation through opportunities that are aimed at fixing the railway infrastructure first. The rail PSP framework recommended the adoption of the cooperative governance and integrated approach to rail private sector participation for implementation. Accordingly, this approach is fully compliant to the PFMA and Companies Act and will require the PSP unit within the Department of Transport and the Rail SOC to publish a network statement for endorsement by the Rail Economic Regulatory Capacity, which is an interim arrangement. With the approval of the Rail PSP framework, the Department of Transport will establish a PSP unit that will identify and prioritize projects and develop an implementation plan to facilitate PSP initiatives. Thirdly, the Integrated Resource Plan 2023. Cabinet considered and approved the publication of the Integrated Resource Plan 2023 for public comments and consultation. The draft IRP 2023 reviews the approved IRP 2019 and covers 2 time zones, namely the 2030 and the 2050 time zones. Several key assumptions used in the IRP 2019 have significantly changed, including electricity demand projection, Eskom's energy availability factor, Eskom's coal-fired power plants shutdown plan, as well as the cost of new power generation technologies. In the 2030 time horizon, which is Horizon 1, the focus is on addressing prevailing generation capacity constraints, whereas the 2031-2050 time horizon, which is Horizon 2, focuses on analysis of the energy mix pathways for sustainable security supply. For Horizon 1, 5 scenarios have been developed and assessed based on the state of readiness of projects in the pipeline. The scenarios considered include first the RMI quadruple P and the REI quadruple P5 and business projects currently under construction. Second, all project initiatives with commercial operation date and a specified location. Third, all project initiatives including those with no grid capacity reservation, a commercial operation date and specified location. Additionally, 2 scenarios, one comprising the reference case and current gas program and another based in improved plant performance according to the generation recovery plan, have been modeled. For the second horizon, 6 energy pathways were considered to assess the impact of the different energy technologies in ensuring the country's power system security of supply at the least cost to the economy. The reference pathway establishes a benchmark against other pathways and is based on least cost. The 5 other pathways are based on certain guiding principles and they are designed to be exploratory in nature. These policy principles were formulated with a focus on decarbonizing the power system, shutting down of existing coal-fired power stations post-2035, and exploring clean coal technologies, including carbon capture. The fourth decision is the draft National Business Licensing Policy. Cabinet considered and approved the draft National Business Licensing Policy for publication for public comments. The objectives of the draft National Business Licensing Policy are, amongst others, the provision of a fair, transparent, and ethical allocation of business operating licenses in a manner that enables the citizens to actively participate in economic life. 2, the assertion and clarification of South Africa's sovereign right to determine the business licensing conditions for foreign nationals in line with the country's national interest. 3rd, the development and implementation of smart and effective licensing arrangements that not only reduce regulatory burdens but also drive empowerment of the previously marginalized communities while reducing compliance burdens and facilitating ease of doing business. On bills, the National State Enterprises Bill, Cabinet has approved for submission of the National State Enterprises Bill to Parliament. The establishment of the state-owned holding company to ensure effective oversight of state-owned companies and separate the operational, regulatory and policy-making roles of the government. The bill proposes the establishment of the State's Asset Management SOC Limited as a holding company for state shareholding of strategic SOCs with the state as a sole shareholder. On appointments, and all appointments are subject to the verification of qualifications and relevant security clearances. The CEO of the Road Management Traffic Corporation, Cabinet approved the reappointment of Advocate Makhosini Msibi as the Chief Executive Officer of the Road Traffic Management Corporation for a period of 3 years. Members of the Val Orange Catchment Management Agency, Mr. Desmond Solomon Fransman as the Chairperson, Mr. Kani Zwane as the Deputy Chairperson, Mr. Hubert Thompson, Miss Tutuzelo Njeza, Mr. Nakana Lazarus Masuka, Miss Pona Chehu Lizi Mutibi, Miss Doris Liana Teresia Dondio, Miss Dichakane Rachel Masheho, and Mr. Louis van Oorsoren. And Cabinet approved the filling of the vacancy of the non-executive director of the Road Accident Fund Board by Mr. Khumbudzo James Sillo, and they approved the appointment of non-executive directors of the Road Traffic Infringement Agency with Mr. Bonolo Mulemu Ramukele as the chairperson and reappointment, Dr. Daukas Khosa Shkwambane as a reappointment, and Advocate Sibongile Mzinyati as a reappointment. The Department of Transport will then announce additional members that will be appointed to this board. Members of the Railway Safety Regulator Board, Ms. Nompumelelo Sibongile Eke as the chairperson, is a reappointment. Mr. Sisa Lungamto, deputy chairperson. Advocate Johannes Colin Webpont is a reappointment. Ms. Makanya, Ms. Nolita Peterson, Professor Tsepo Herbert Mangalo, Mr. Lungi Maminza, and Mr. Tawana Mupedi, Ms. Sibusisiwe Nomfundo Mulifi, and Ms. Xoliswa Njokeni Mlojo. Cabinet also approved the appointment of non-executive directors of the Board of Control of the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, Ms. Nosizwe Nonkwe Maqomo, Advocates Manga Sitene, Mr. Mukhuba Matodzi, Ms. Tinabuyo Mpye, Dr. Riabetsi Horwadira, Professor Jan Havenger, Ms. Happy Ralinada, and Mr. Johannes Boy Nobunga. Upcoming events: the National Day of Reconciliation. President Ramaphosa will address the National Day of Reconciliation celebrations that will take place on the 16th of November 2023 at the Thondo Stadium in Thulamela Municipality, Bembe District of Limpopo. On messages of congratulations, Cabinet extends its congratulations and well wishes to Mr. Dan Murakane on his appointment as the Group Chief Executive Officer of ESCOM, Mr. Othaniel Tsepo Monageng as the Group Chief Executive Officer of Denel, the Blitzbokkers for winning the Dubai Servants title, and wish them well as they prepare for the Cape Town Servants on the 9th and 10th December 2023. On condolences, Cabinet extends its condolences to the family and friends of the 13th mine worker who succumbed to his injuries after the recent mine accident at the Impala Platinum Mine. Last time we promised to name the deceased miners because an accident of this nature has not happened in our country for the longest time. I'll now take the time to read the names of the 13 mine workers who lost their lives in this accident, starting with Khayaletu Joel Bekamani, Vuyani Dangazela, Magcineni Dlabone, Ncedisi Hukwana, Eric Fanisile Libada, Morena Hlomi, Petrus Nare, Mandisi Nkulwana, Zweletu Nomsuka, Rasilibeledi Elias Ntoyi, Siyabulela Nzome, Letola Neba, and Marumo Shasha. May their souls rest in peace. We extend our condolences to the family and friends of veterinarian clinician, a researcher and academic, Professor Harry Sterfeld, who spent more than 50 years in the Department of Medicine at the University of Witwatersrand and passionately educated generations of medical practitioners and researchers. To the family and friends of Jermaine Craig, renowned media practitioner, journalist, and former head of communications for the 2010 FIFA World Cup Local Organizing Committee. Cabinet wishes to extend its best wishes for the festive season and wish to call upon all South Africans to arrive alive, drive safely on the roads, and keep to the allowed speed limits, but also the following distances. We wish to also extend our messages to South Africans to keep safe during these festive seasons and protect their properties against criminal. And we are confident that law enforcement plan that is in place to keep the festive season safe will keep South Africans alive until we meet next year. And to yourself, members of the Fourth Estate, thank you for working with us in 2023. We look forward to working together in 2024. Thank you. We'll then do the questions and then we'll hand over to the Operation Volindlela team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think, Minister, your words of saying we'll meet next year means this is the very last post-cabinet briefing for this year. And thank you very much. Colleagues, we will start with the questions in the press room. Then later on, we'll then go to our colleagues that have joined us online. The drill is the same. You'll raise your hand, press on the red button there. You introduce yourself and the media house, and then the question. Let me see any takers. Yes,
Minister, just your reaction on the statement by Water that they're quite concerned about the high water consumption in Gauteng.
Thank you very much. I see another hand.
One on the 19 South Africans that were stuck in Gaza. Were they stuck in Gaza since October when the shelling of Gaza started? And what role did the Egyptian government play in them making their way back to South Africa? And the other one is on the company that you said has been proposed to basically oversee the state-owned enterprises. How does this then affect the plan that was in place to basically take all the state-owned enterprises under their line department, like your Transnet to the Department of Transport? How does that affect this plan? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if we have another hand. No hand gone. Thank you very much, Minister. Those are the questions that we have from the House.
Thank you for those questions. In terms of the rainwater, it's not new. I think you'll recall that in August and also in June, in part of the cabinet statement, we indicated that there is a challenge of high water consumption in Gauteng, and we called upon the residents of Gauteng province to look after the water infrastructure to make sure that we don't waste water. But the challenges of water shortages in Gauteng in terms of the Department of Water and Sanitation and the Rand Water as the agency managing the water in Gauteng is indicated as one, due to water losses, which are also exacerbated by the poor maintenance of the infrastructure. And there's a program that the Minister of Water and Sanitation, together with the executive mayors of the metros and the other district municipalities, they meet. At that point, they were meeting every second week to discuss the plans to make sure that they can cap water losses and plans to upgrade the infrastructure, because it's an aged infrastructure. And we had called on citizens and residents to look up to use water sparingly. But if you'll recall, the last couple of weeks there has been a heat wave across the country. So water consumption was an unavoidable phenomenon. People needed to keep hydrated. Those with pools, they needed to swim, and to swim you needed to clean the pool. But there have been a call by both the Department of Water and Sanitation and also the water agencies, the Rand Water in particular, to say those who are maintaining their pools, they must not clean the pool with tap water. They must then they must apply for water and purchase water to refresh water in their own pools as part of savings. But also those with gardens, that they must be sparing in terms of watering the gardens, because we need to prioritize water for consumption. You will recall that South Africa is a water scarce country, and therefore the call for us to use water sparingly is not only limited to the people of Gauteng, it applies across the country. You'll recall that I think a few years ago, Western Cape had to go to a day zero arrangement in terms of water saving. So we are working together with the Rand Water and hoping with our communities to make sure that we save water as part of preserving the scarce resource that our country has. And on the question about the people who were stuck in Gaza, yes, nobody was able to move out of Gaza since the October 7th events to date. And the role of the Egyptian government was to help us to get safe passage, because they could only cross through Rafah, and allow us to then take them over to come back to South Africa. That's why we are grateful to them. And then on the state enterprise company, the establishment of the state-owned company is not exclusive to the decision. It does not change the decision that has been made previously. The SOCs will still go back to their line policy departments, but in terms of the governance, the boards, and all those things, then the SOC asset management company will then take over to make sure that in terms of policy, the SOCs or the state-owned companies are in line with what the policy department is driving. But in terms of boards, and I'm sure you have noticed the instability of boards, because normally ministers tend to remove boards when they come through, even when the boards are very good. But to offer that stability, you'll need people who are objective, so that they can then run and put boards that are effective, that are skilled, that are not beholden to not only a minister or the management or the administrators in a particular department, and therefore when those administrators leave, they then become susceptible to leaving. It will provide stability to the companies. This model is not new in terms of us. It's been done in other countries. It's been done in Malaysia. It's been done in Singapore. But we are introducing it to make sure we can then stabilize the challenges that we have had at the state-owned companies. I'm sure if you go to the history of the bulk or majority of our state-owned companies, the instabilities and their failure to perform has been a result of the changes in the boards and management, where they are mostly driven by changes in the political or executive leadership. So this company will insulate that in terms of establishment of boards, but the SOC will then go back to the line policy departments to ensure policy alignment with the mother department, to say so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I will then request to take the questions that are online. Not sure who's assisting. Tagalani?
Thank you, Mr. Lee. The first question is coming from Carol Patton from News 24. And the question is, did Cabinet endorse the Transnet turnaround plan as drafted by the board? Specifically, will there be an equity injection for Transnet? And another question from Carol. In the envisaged partnership with Gazprom Bank, will the state be required to make an equity investment? And is it envisaged that an equity stake will be sold? And the third question, did Cabinet make amendments to the IRP as presented by Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy? And when will the IRP be gazetted? And Lindsay from Eyewitness News. Has Cabinet discussed communication from Parliament regarding its resolution on severing diplomatic ties with Israel? And are there more South Africans stranded in Gaza that need to be evacuated? And Susan Comrie from Amabungane Center for Investigative Journalism, regarding the Cabinet's decision to approve Petro SA partnership with Russia's Gazprom Bank, did Cabinet consider the risk of secondary sanctions, the risk that other international suppliers and service providers may be forced to cut ties with Petro SA? And the questions from Terence Kramer, who is representing Engineering News. The first one, when will the IRP document be released for public comment? And what public comment period has been set aside? And will there be public hearings? And was there a plan to create a framework for private sector participation in the building and financing of transmission infrastructure discussed? And if so, why was it not endorsed? And were there names of the National Transmission Company South Africa Board placed before Cabinet for concurrence? And if so, why were they not approved? And we have Paul from Bloomberg. What other companies were considered as investment partners in the refinery, and what did Gazprom offer that made it the preferred partner? And lastly, from Anton Meyer from Pretoria FM, did President discuss a possible date for the elections with the Cabinet? Thank you.
Thank you very much, TK. Those, Minister, are the questions that we have received online, and I think maybe it might be the last version, unless if there are follow-ups from the House. Thank you very much, Minister.
I'll start with a question on, I was trying to take the notes, but my notes are terrible. I'll start with a question on the Gazprom Bank, on whether we've considered an equity injection. No, there's not equity injection considered. The project is on a risk and benefit share basis. And the first part they are doing is they are going to do a due diligence in terms of a bankable business case. And when that has been done, there will be an investment decision that will be taken around April, the final investment decision. So they are investing. Gazprom Bank was already in South Africa. Gazprom Bank Africa was already in South Africa, by the way. They are going to be investing in that project on a risk basis. And outcome of that will then finalize a bankable business case, and then the final terms and conditions for the final investment decision. And that's what we've considered. And whether we've considered the secondary sanctions, the possibility of secondary sanctions, I think, let me explain it this way. Of course, they would have done a risk assessment and what are the risks. And we need to explain to South Africans that South Africa is not the first country that will be having ties with the Gazprom Bank or with the Russian company in terms of oil. India itself has ties with Russian. They procure oil from Russia and they on-sell it. EU countries have ties with Russia. Even the US have ties with Russia. There have been what we call exemptions that are considered in terms of the sanctions of the US that are done. But what Cabinet considered as fundamental is the investment that will yield results for this country, but also that will be beneficial to lowering the price of fuel in the country with our ability to bring back the Mossel Bay GTL refinery. And if you will have to recall is that when they went out on tender, they considered what we call a state-to-state partnership, and Gazprom Bank Africa, it's owned by the Russian Federation, which is a state-to-state, because there are then questions of whether we have considered the tender process. The tender process was run through Petro SA fully, and that will be their compliance issues. We were confronted with the selection of a partner in terms of the recommendation. And in terms of the submission that Cabinet was furnished with when the update was provided, we are certain that they have followed what is due diligence to make sure that it stands the scrutiny. And there's a question of saying 19 out of 20 were disqualified. That's not the reports that we have, but you can go to Petro SA for those details. We, as Cabinet, we were not party of the procurement process. We were considering a recommendation of a partner, and that's what we considered, and we made we supported their recommendation, having weighed all the others. And if you recall, the South African relationship with the Russian Federation is driven by our partnership in BRICS. And that's not going to change tomorrow. South Africa is not going to withdraw from the BRICS partnership. And we are aware that there are countries who are not happy with our partnership or our participation in the BRICS. But as part of the BRICS nations, we have committed to increase trade and investment relations as part of strengthening that partnership. There is no point of South Africa being in BRICS and then do not want to partner with BRICS countries in terms of trade and investment. It's part of making sure that we build a resilient economy that is not susceptible to only one side of the global balance of powers, but that can be insulated from the risk of global balance of powers. Our relationship with our BRICS partners does not negate our relationship with other countries who are not within the BRICS. We value our relationship in terms of our relationships with those countries as governed by either our bilateral relations agreements or the way we relate as countries, but we remain a sovereign state. And there was another question on the IRP document to say when will it be released for public comment and whether there's a set time for hearings. We have approved for the IRP document to be released for public comments. The Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy will have to then gazette that in terms of law and set the timelines for consultations as required in terms of the stipulated period by law. And the Cabinet cannot therefore prescribe what must be done. And there was a question of whether the Cabinet discussed the framework for private sector participation in the build and financing of transmission infrastructure. Yes, it was discussed, but there's still more work to be done, and that is the work that has to be done. So we could not announce it because it's still work in progress. There's work that is still being finalized, and when it's finalized, it will go back to Cabinet and it will be discussed. But it's part of the work that is being done in earnest as part of improving our energy security, because without the transmission power lines being in place, it will mean the majority or the bulk of the renewable energy energy that is available to the country will not be able to access the grid timelessly. And we are working in earnest to make sure that comes into the fold quick enough, and that's why the proposals that are being considered in the transmission infrastructure proposal, including the financing and the partnership. And whether the National Transmission Company of South Africa was placed before Cabinet, it was not placed before Cabinet. It will be, and we need to clarify, it's not all things that must go to Cabinet. The President has the powers to take decisions on appointment of board. And if it's urgent, it has to be considered. I'm sure the President will apply his mind and take a decision on that. So we need to be to clarify that part. On the there's a specific question regarding the SOC holding company bill, which says, will the state-owned entities currently reporting to DMRE, including Petro SA, Central Energy Fund, and proposed SA National Petroleum Company, be incorporated into the proposed SOC holding company? By the way, when the South African National Petroleum Company is in place, there won't be the Petro SA and the Central Energy Fund, because they're going to then be one. The decisions of which SOCs are going to then go into the SOC holding company or the asset management company will be finalized in due course. Will apply our minds for currently is to establish a law through Parliament that allows us the establishment of the SOC Asset Management Company of South Africa, and then we'll have engagements of which are the entities that are ready to go into that fold, and therefore I cannot say yes or no whether the South African National Petroleum Company will then fold in terms of appointment of its board and governance and go into the SOC Asset Management Company. And there was another question of will the line minister still appoint boards and chief executives? The intention is to remove the appointment of boards from line ministers to the SOC holding company. And then there was a question on did I answer the question on the Transnet turnaround plan and equity direction? Not yet. The Transnet turnaround plan has not been submitted to Cabinet. Cabinet has full confidence in the board of Transnet that they will implement what they've set out to do. They had, if you recall, they've committed with their minister to update the nation every second week in terms of the progress they are making to reduce the backlogs that are in our ports, and also the work they are doing with the rail infrastructure. And that's what you need to follow up on. Whether there will be equity injection to the Transnet board, already National Treasury announced, and the guarantees that they needed to be signed for Transnet to be able to unlock its balance sheet and also be able to finance some of the basic work that has to be done. The announcement was done, I think, last week, if I'm not mistaken. So we are. So there's no, even if there's no cash injection, there is or equity injection into Transnet, there is government guarantees to make sure that Transnet can function. We know the balance sheet of Transnet on its own without government guarantees is not sufficient to enable it to get out and acquire debt, because what they have to do is also to acquire new debt as they clean up so that they can be able to perform. And then there was the last question on whether the President discussed the possible date for election with the Cabinet. That's why it's called presidential prerogative, and the Constitution leaves that strictly between the President and the IEC, that they must consult each other, and the President must then determine the election date. And that election date, there is a prescribed period in terms of our laws to say it must be within which time frame after the last elections were held. So that President, we don't want to get President in trouble of violating his oath of office and Cabinet influencing his decision to determine the election date. The election date remains the sole prerogative of the President, and I'm sure after the IEC would have updated him with the progress that they have made with all the things. If you recall, there are still matters in court as it relates to elections, about the constitutionality of this and the constitutionality of that, even with the recent Concord judgment in terms of the participation of independent candidates. There's still work that has to be done. I'm sure the IEC, when they finalize that work to prepare for the elections, they will then brief and update the president, who will then determine the election date. So we must not rush for the election date. We must allow all the work that has to be done by the IEC, which are also dependent of on the court challenges that are being made, to be finalized, and give the president the time and space to make the election date. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Minister. Minister, after you responded to especially the question on Petro SA, I think Susan Comrie said she wants to send a follow-up question. I'm not sure, Tagalani, if you have it on record, that side.
Thank you, Mr. B.S. She did send a clarity seeking or a follow-up question. And he said, could I confirm that I accurately understood the minister comment regarding the Petro SA tender process that selected Gazprom Bank? Was Cabinet not told that 19 out of 20 bidders failed to meet the 80% technical qualification criteria during the bid adjudication process? And this was communicated in multiple Petro SA documents and legal opinions, which suggests none of these documents were shared with Cabinet. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister. That's the last one from our side.
Thank you. I think I've explained that Cabinet was not in the Petro SA tender evaluation. Cabinet was furnished with sufficient information to take a decision on the partner, on who will be a partner to Petro SA for the Mossel Bay GTL refinery reinstatement. I would not want to be discussing what was in front of Cabinet when Cabinet took a decision, but Cabinet was furnished with sufficient information to make a decision. And because we don't want to be clarifying the Petro SA procurement or tender processes, that remains the responsibility of Petro SA. And again, we wish to thank you for coming, but we would like to invite Mr. Rudy Dix to join us, and as we move over to the Operation Vulindlela third quarter report. But Rudy, we had already agreed that Ms. Guma is the one presenting the... Come through. We have already agreed Ms. Guma is the one presenting the third quarter report, so we don't want to change those arrangements as we want to show the girl power. And I'd like to invite Ms. Guma to then take over from me. And you are in the capable hands of the Operation Vulindlela team, supported by myself and the Minister of Finance in absentia.
No, thank you very much, Minister, and thank you also for emphasizing gender balance. May I indicate that the presentation by Operation Vula, the one that is going to be made, is going to be shared now with members of the media on the groups. I think Tagalani will share it, so that as and when she takes us through the presentation, you are able to also have access to it. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for that handover, Minister. Rudy was coming to steal some thunder here. So, on the occasion of the launch of this latest OV update, it is actually a combined Q3 and Q4 progress update, Minister, and actually marks quite an auspicious occasion for Operation Vulindlela. You recall that this is a joint initiative between the Presidency and the National Treasury to accelerate the implementation of growth-enhancing structural reforms. And we've now been in operation for 3 years, slightly over 3 years. So this marks the release of our 3-year review and our 3rd-year anniversary. So I will take you briefly through some highlights of the report. We will we'll make this available to members of the media after this. It will also be released to the public on the State of the Nation website later on today. But just so that you're not squinting on your phones to follow every part of the slide, I'll just touch on the key elements. So Operation Vulindlela has 5 key aims, just to recap. Firstly is to ensure a stable supply of electricity. Second, to reduce the cost and increase the quality of digital telecommunications. Third is to ensure a sustainable quality water supply, both now and in the future. Fourth is a competent, efficient, and competitive freight logistics network. And finally, a visa regime that supports tourism and allows South Africa to attract the appropriate skills for growth. In the time that Operation Vulindlela has been in operation, we've been able to make significant progress in accelerating some of these reforms. Our legislative agenda has continued to make progress, so we've made some regulatory changes to enable private investment in electricity generation. We are currently tracking a energy pipeline of renewables that is up to 66 gigawatts at this stage. And from an investment point of view, what we track is a pipeline of over 200 billion rands worth of investments. On the telecommunications space, we have seen the conclusion of the spectrum auction already in 2022. What the report does is attempt to assess or quantify the impact that this has had already on economic growth, and we will get into some of the details of that later on. But what is without doubt is that it resulted in an immediate boost of 14 billion rand to the fiscus, and has since then resulted in increased speeds, download speeds, and increased investment into the sector. We've also conducted and completed with Home Affairs a comprehensive review of the visa system and the revised immigration regulations to give effect to some of the recommendations that were made by this report are due to be gazetted shortly. The National Rail Policy was adopted also in 2021, and this opened the way for a lot of the work that we are doing in the logistics sector now, a lot of the work that has been rolled into the NLCC to accelerate structural reform in logistics. Finally, there's been a clearing of the backlog of water use licenses and a re-engineering of that system to reduce the probability of further backlogs growing in future. And we did speak to this in the Q2 report, as well as the positive impact that that has had on GDP. If I turn now just to a look at the dashboard and where we are in terms of the progress that Operation Vulindlela has made so far as we stand in Q4 2023. There are no activities, if we compare this to Q2, there are no activities that have yet to be started. Everything is currently underway or finalized. And there are no activities that are critically endangered and that we think are unlikely to be completed by the end of this first phase. What we have in green, which are activities that we believe to be broadly on track, are 12 activities or 34% of the total. If you combine this with both the dark blue block, which is reforms that have been completed and no further work is required, as well as the light blue block, which is reforms that have completed but where further work is required, the sum total of these blocks means that over 70% of reforms have either been completed or will be completed by the end of this current phase, which would be with the end of this current administration. There is a minority of reforms that are slightly off track or delayed, but work is underway to get all of those reforms back on track. And with the assistance of both the Minister and the Presidency and the Minister of Finance, we're confident that we'll be able to make some inroads here. If I turn now just to summarize the key achievements of the last 2 quarters, what I spoke to earlier was the analog switch-off. So this is for frequencies above 694 megahertz. This is to give effect to the spectrum allocations that would have been made along with the auction. We've seen the Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill make its way through Parliament. We are at the point where public hearings on this have been concluded, and we would await the further processing of this bill. 3 units at Kusile have returned to service ahead of schedule, and this has helped to reduce the severity of load shedding. We've also seen Eskom launch the cross-border standard offer program, and this is to procure available megawatts from neighboring countries and utilities. We've also, as the Minister indicated, the Minister of Public Enterprises announced earlier the appointment of independent board members to the TNPA. This is to help to spur the independence of that entity and in the hopes that it will further accelerate the freight logistics reform agenda. An international terminal operator has been selected to partner with Transport at Durban Pier 2, and Transnet is soon to relaunch the process to find a private sector partner at the port of Mocha as well. The Department of Home Affairs has launched the Trusted Employer Scheme, and this is to partner with employers who want to make use of foreign skills to allow for an upfront assessment and auditing process, and then speedier processing of visas thereafter. This scheme opened for applications in October and closed for applications in November, and we await further details from the Home Affairs Department on the implementation of this, which is due to proceed in the first quarter of next year. And then finally, a one-stop shop was established for energy projects that investors want to start, and under the auspices of the one-stop shop that is held at the DTIC. And through that pipeline, we are tracking 12 gigawatts of projects that are about to come online. If I turn now to the major announcement of the last 2 quarters, that is actually the adoption of the Freight Logistics Roadmap by Cabinet. I won't go through all of the detail because this document has been available for public comment for quite some time, but just want to emphasize some key aspects of the roadmap just to prevent any misunderstanding about what it is and what it isn't. Firstly, port and rail infrastructure are regarded as natural monopolies. This means that they're most efficient when people are sharing the infrastructure rather than duplicating the infrastructure. And what the roadmap sets out is that, and what Cabinet has endorsed, is that these are strategic national assets. So this is not a plan for privatization. They will remain within the control of the state. However, it is possible to distinguish port and rail infrastructure from port and rail operations. And it's in the operation space where we want to encourage greater competition from the private sector in order to drive efficiency and lower costs. What this means is that you need a regulator in this space to allow for meaningful competition so that all players can play on a level playing field. This means that in line with the roadmap that has been adopted by Cabinet, the roadmap focuses then on the vertical separation of infrastructure and operations within Transnet. This is similar to what is already underway for Eskom. And the objectives here are simply to move away from a situation where Transnet has a full monopoly in both ownership and operations, and one which is in line with international best practice, where you have multiple operators sharing infrastructure in order to drive efficiency. I won't speak too much about the assessing impact section. You could go through that in the report and when it's finally distributed. But just to touch on some key facts, what we've been doing in the Operation Vulindlela updates is attempting to give a flavor for what impact these reforms are actually having on the ground already. We know that reforms take a while to fully find expression in economic data. Our hope is that these short analyses give a sense of what has already been achieved and what can be achieved over the coming years. So firstly, just to indicate that the amount generated by the auction resulted in an injection to the fiscus of 14.4 billion immediately, and then spurred greater investment in the sector. What this does, or has already done, is seen, as I indicated, an increase in download speeds, but also improved coverage. If I just quote some of the facts from the report, 4G coverage increased from 92.8% in 2020 to 98% in 2022, which is the latest available data, while 5G coverage increased from 0.7% in 2020 to 20% 2 years later in 2022. What we've seen is that download speeds have then increased from 4.36 megabits per second to 36.46 megabits per second between 2017 and 2023. This has coincided with a significant reduction in the cost of data. We use the price of a 100 megabits bundle just to provide a benchmark. And since 2021, we've seen the lowest pricing on this actually decrease by 25%, which would no doubt have made significant impact for those of us who need to buy data in order to remain connected and do our work. So if I summarize then with just some of the focus areas that OV will continue to work on in the next quarter, we'll continue to work on driving the unbundling of Eskom, and work in this area will focus on the National Transmission Company, which is expected to be fully operational by April 2024. All of the relevant licenses have been approved and transferred to this entity. What remains is for the announcement of the board there. We'll continue to focus on reforms to improve efficiencies in freight, in the logistics sector, both freight, rail, and ports. This work will be driven through the NLCC, so expanding open access here and finalizing the selection of private sector partners for the remaining ports where this may be introduced. The release of revised immigration regulations we are anticipating in the next quarter. As I indicated, this will give effect to the recommendations from the work visa review. In the water sector, the establishment of the National Water Resources Infrastructure Agency, as well as the finalization of the raw water pricing strategy, are expected to be complete by Q1 2024 as well. And then we'll continue to build momentum on some of the newer reforms that we have picked up in the latter months. This includes expediting the issuance of title deeds for low-income housing, developing a framework for the devolution of passenger rail to local level, and then an enabling regulatory framework for hemp and cannabis. And finally, implementation of a long-outstanding, long-awaited new mining rights system. Thank you. I will leave that there.
Colleagues, thank you very much. That is the presentation on Operation Vulindlela. I see there is a slide actually that is summarizing, I think it's slide 9, that is giving, the summary of all the updates that has been given. I'm not sure if Rudy, you want to do some additions or should immediately invite questions. No, thank you very much.
William have been vetoed.
The gender balance. Thank you very much. Colleagues, let me check if we have any questions in the press room, or Takalani, you'll give an indication if there are questions on the online platform. And may we also check that the presentation is shared with the media groups that we have. I'm not seeing any hand, Minister, but I take it that it's a work in progress. Colleagues will get an opportunity to then go through the slides that have been presented on the achievements up to thus far, including, of course, that slide that I've just seen, which is summarizing all the achievements, and especially the one on the data that we have seen a decrease in prices, close to 25% decrease since it was done. On that note, let me check if, Minister, you have a last word to say before we adjourn the briefing. Thank you.
Thank you. I think my last word is just to reaffirm government's commitment to drive structural reforms so that our economy can then move with speed and resilience. And we are fully aware of the impact of the structural constraints, and we have seen that in the Q3 GDP figures that were recently released. But if you check both cabinet decisions and also the Q3 and Q4 Operation Vulindlela progress report, we're addressing those structural constraints with significant speed so that the economy can start to perform fully, well and efficiently, so that we can support its resilience but also grow investments in this country. We are hoping that next quarter when we report, we would have achieved significant progress in that regard. As I've already wished everybody well for the Christmas season, I would not want to spoil it. And but just to say, Rudy, we're fine without you, baby.
That's a happy mood for the last month of the year. Colleagues, on that note, let me also join the Minister in thanking you for your cooperation all the time to be here to make sure that all South Africans, including